Before we take questions, I'd just like to thank Josh Frydenberg for the $250 he gave me to get rid of cost of living increases. And I've calculated that over the next 3 years of the Parliament, that amounts to $1.60 a week. So thank you, Josh, for that $1.60 a week. It sends a message on how much the Liberal Party actually cares about the community. But then again, the Labor Party gave us nothing. All right, so if we have any questions for Andrew or me, we can answer the press questions at all or not? Yes.
Hey, Cotsman, all the Ventures Review. Hi.
There you go.
So you're preferencing the Liberals in most of the seat, almost all of the seats. Why is that?
Well, that's just not true. We're not preferencing the Liberals. I don't know if you've looked at that, but if you look at you want to give me a seat, that we're not preferencing Liberals. We're preferencing about 40% across Australia of Labor Party candidates and about 60% of Liberal or Liberal independents, I guess you could call them, rather than actual Liberal Party people, because we're really focusing on our other policy and where people stand on freedom in this country. And we believe that when we're elected, there should be an Australian Bill of Rights that ends lockdowns, that ends vaccine passports, and also provides for freedom of speech and liberty in this country, much as there is in the United States, one of our closest allies. We believe in those truths, inalienable rights, which have been recognised in the US Constitution, and we believe those things are fundamental. So we're looking at, when we're giving preferences, to how people stand on those issues and whether they have the courage to support us, like in the case of the Liberal Party, Lou O'Brien in Queensland, the endorsed Liberal candidate, crossed the floor with Craig Kelly, where he put forward a bill to stop vaccine mandates. There are senators in South Australia and Queensland, there's George Christensen in North, they're all Liberals that did the same thing. But courage is one of the most rarest commodities in politics. And politics has no reward. History is its only reward, where it should be. But unfortunately, the Liberal Party, especially in this town, it's full of lobbyists. And we've seen the muck of the New South Wales Liberal Party go on for a long, long time. We've seen the Liberal senator recently gave her opinion about the corruption that exists inside the Liberal Party. And that's not about public service. That's about creating money for yourself, for wealth. And it's just corruption that needs to stop. And of course, ICAC in here in New South Wales has been the focus of the nation. We've seen that. And we've seen Anthony Albanese on television too much, look like Joe Biden. We've seen him stumbling, not knowing whether he was in Balmain, his own electorate. And it's very sad that we're getting politics to a stage where we don't put forward in society our best people, our most successful people. We put people that can be controlled, basically controlled by lobbyists. There are lobbyists in this town that I'm aware of that have taken tens of millions of dollars from pharmaceutical companies to ensure the state government adopts their policies. And that's nothing short of corruption. And we can't put money or anything above the lives of people. And you've seen what's happened in China, in Shanghai, where people have been locked down. We're not a communist country. Our Australians believe in freedom. We want to be all we can be. And when we look at who we preference, we look at people who will stand up for liberty.
Who are you preferencing to see?
Well, I can give you how to vote card when we go outside.
Are you preferencing the Liberals after you guys?
No, we're not. But I can give you how to vote card. The preferencing here comes with a big interaction of local people. It's not a question that Clive Palmer or Craig Kelly decides who the preferences will go to. We actually look at the candidates and what they stand for as individuals, not just as objects or as party machines, but we look at the policies they stand for, how they'll support things. So I'm sure Andrew will be happy.
Yeah, do you want me to answer a bit of that?
Yeah, Andrew can answer that.
So in Warringah, really the only other freedom-minded candidate that is running is a gentleman called Stephen Tripp from One Nation. I know Stephen well, he's a really nice guy, and he actually is putting Australians first. He wants Australians to be responsible for their own decision-making. After that, we have preference Catherine Deves from the Liberal Party. And then really the last four on our preference sheet pretty much all stand on the same policy effectively, which is climate change in this area, which we know will be very, very destructive from an economic point of view for a lot of families in this area.
You talk about bodily autonomy. Do you agree with what Deves has been saying about trans people?
Do you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. Well, we believe in freedom and freedom of choice, right? And we also believe that we don't want these issues to distract from the real issues in the election. For many years, we had a big debate about same-sex marriage. Regardless of where you stand on that issue, it wasn't the only issue facing Australians, but it took control of the political agenda. And likewise, sexual issues are taking control of political agenda here. We believe that sexual choice is a matter of individuality, it's not a matter of public policy, right? As I said, it shouldn't be used by Harley Stagel or other people or other candidates to hide what the real issues are. And the real issues are the things that affect most of the people in this area, which has to be interest rates at the moment, their financial security, and we think it's just the press diverting the real debate. So we want to keep bringing it back to what we think is important.
In terms of the hard power, if there's hard power, would you do a deal with Labor and Liberals to form government?
Well, we'll do a deal with anybody to get these policies enacted and brought about. We're standing not for or against people, we're standing for a proposition. And the proposition really is that we can have a free and independent Australia, and we can do what's best for the Australian people, especially our three economic policies. And I think Craig Kelly's been the great exponent and shown the most courage of anyone in the Western world when fighting for freedom and those freedoms, and there's no doubt about that. So,
how many seats do you think you could win?
well, I don't think, I just do. I just think this is a proposition that needs to be put, and that we put it, right? So it's up to the Australian people to decide, because we believe in democracy in this country. We don't presume their votes. You got a question there?
Yes, sir. I believe in everything that you stand for and what you're trying to do for this country. I'd like to, since most people here in Australia are educated through the media, is there any, how do we get it where all of these media stations, particularly the ABC, will put out all of the facts and let the Australian people figure it out?
Well,
How do we deal with that?
it's a difficult question, but in the United States in 1933 they had the Fair Reporting Act, and that was an act that required journalists to present both sides of the stories by direct quotes from people rather than by editorial. And that was abolished under Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, and you see it declining in journalistic standards. I think if you're going to ever do anything like that, that's the sort of thing you should look at. But how do we do it? And Craig Kelly and I sat down in Parliament, and he said, well, I'm prepared to do all that I can in my life to give up my political career in the Liberal Party, to cross the floor, to provide any leadership. He said, but what are you going to do, Clive? So I said, well, I'll put in $100 million so we can get some coverage of these issues to people.
Yeah.
And if you want to look at how much money we'll spend in this campaign, we normally get that question from the press. We'll probably spend about $80 million or so on the total campaign, but our campaign's for advertising. And if you look at the cost of the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, they'll spend about $80 million as well. But they'll get all the free media, they'll get all the coverage that we don't get. So unless we're prepared to do that, we wouldn't get our message across. And there's a good reason why we wouldn't get our message across, because we're attacking the status quo and saying what's best for people. We're not acting on the instructions of lobbyists or interest groups. And most of the media in this country has been captured by one form, left or right, by self-interest.
Speaking of media, you probably saw the reports that the price of paper has gone up 80%, and ACN, who I work for, is looking to the government, the current government, for support. Otherwise, regional and rural newspapers will close down and jobs will be lost. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, it's a very dangerous thing to have the money from the government to fund your freedom and your ideas, because that can be used as a lever. For example, we wanted to put certain advertisements in papers owned by News Corp, and we were advised that if we mentioned the vaccine, they wouldn't run the paper, and we further inquired why that was. They said because the government had threatened them with taking away all their advertising if they did. So government already controls a lot of our media by the force of advertising and how much they spend. And this has been the first time that they've laid down a policy to the media that no one can be critical of various policies about the vaccine, for example. We're not a pro-vaxxer, anti-vaxxer party. We're a pro-choice party. We believe in freedom of choice, where people and individuals should be able to have that right. But of course, the Liberal Party doesn't believe in that. And it was just revealed recently that Greg Hunt wrote to Dan Andrews telling him he should impose the lockdowns and mandatory vaccinations. And Greg Hunt wrote to Palaszczuk in Queensland and the Premier here, Berejiklian, telling her she had to lock down part of Sydney and she had to do mandates. He did that because the federal government had no power to do it. Morrison established a national cabinet totally illegally. The federal government, its cabinet, should be the people from the federal parliament that the voters vote for. And instead of that, we had Liberal and Labor premiers to get with Morrison to decide what would happen to Australian lives. All of it illegal, and it could only be implemented because the federal government directed the states to do it, and the states took that direction. So we've learned during the last year that there's nothing different between Labor, Liberal and the Greens. They're all the same. And if you go to Western Australia in this election, the Liberal Party is preferencing the Labor Party directly over our party, and the Labor Party is directing the Liberal Party, preferencing the Liberal Party directly over our party. So the best way to vote for Liberals in Western Australia is to vote for the Labor Party, and the best way to vote for the Labor Party is to vote for the Liberal Party, because they're one and the same. And when you've seen it on our thing saying we can never trust Liberal, Labor or the Greens again, well, it's been proven to be true, because they're trying to stop the Australian people expressing their free will for a change in a different form of government, so that Labor's working the Liberals.
I'm just wondering what else you could spend $80 million on.
My wife. But she has a very frugal life. But I think God's blessed me with some good luck, and this country's been good to me. And it's obscene that you can't spend anything like that on your own self for something I haven't got those needs. If you want to be happy in life, there's a simple formula I found, right? Have someone that loves you, right? Have enough money for a good meal and a warm place to sleep at night. Anything beyond that is like playing golf. It's a distraction. And they're the things you should work on in your life. And that's what I tell my children. And I'm fortunate to have a wife that I love, that I've got a great family, and I've got a warm place to sleep. And I had a good breakfast this morning, so I'm in a pretty good mood, right? I've got all those things, and you know it's all true. But I just want to say to the members of the media here that own houses, what are you going to do when interest rates get to 6 or 8%? What's your family going to do? What pressure will that put you under? Because we are people that are trying to help you. We're trying to help you save your home and stop what's about to happen to you. Because we know when interest rates get to 6 or 8%, when they've been to 17% under Labor previously, we know you'll lose your houses. We know that the property market will crash. We'll know that people that haven't actually got a mortgage will see their investment in their home go down to a much smaller value, because things will be a lot cheaper. There'll be so much on the market. And we'll know that foreign investors will buy it. And we'll see the omnipresent government saying, well, we'll have to help you out. We'll buy some of the houses and we'll lease them to you. Albanese can't wait to do that. He's even trying to do it now, right? And of course, when they lease the houses to you, they'll have conditions in it to say you turn your lights out at 8 o'clock. Yeah. You don't have more than 4 guests there. You don't use so much power or energy because it's limited to society and it's unfair. We'll see all those things come in. And all of them are designed to control you. So when we say freedom forever, it's not just about the vaccines. The real damage of the vaccines was the reckless debt that was run up while that was happening of over $1 trillion. So the next step can take place in their plan to control your lives. So freedom means freedom of choice, freedom of home ownership. It's your ability to be able to rely on your savings, your ability to think and express your point of view, even if your neighbour disagrees with you. And that's what we stand for. And that contrasts greatly with a totalitarian regime in China, and we've seen what's happened in Russia and the Ukraine, how our people are trying to be controlled through history. And when they talk about the Solomon Islands and they see what they've done with China, there are thousands of Americans that gave their lives on the Solomon Islands for freedom. And if I was the American president, I'd put a few warships in there and just anchor them for a while and protect freedom again. Because America has had an interest. They've given up their lives to protect and defend the people. The Chinese shouldn't be able to come along and bribe someone to change their policy contrary to the people. And just 6 months ago, it was Australian troops and Australian police that protected that president when his people rose up and said he couldn't stand it any longer. So, there needs to be an election there properly, and there needs to be freedom in this country. And we've got to realise that our best allies are the people that have the same values of us and the same beliefs in freedom as the United States, and New Zealand, England, Canada, the Five Eyes, that we're all sticking together. And all of this stuff that other people are going on with. There's people that are not aware of what's happening in the world and don't really care. They don't really believe that Xi Jinping would bring the troops into Sydney. I'm sure he would. There's no hesitation about that. If only, I'm no friend of the Chinese, I can tell you that. And I've gone from China since 1962 was my first visit to China, and there was millions and millions of people killed in the early 60s from starvation in China. There's over 1 million Uyghurs that are locked up. And, artificial intelligence has been rolled out throughout the country. And in Sweden now, they've got a chip that can go in your hand. You can put your bank account in it, and they can actually fine you and take money out of your bank account if you walk across the wrong part of the road. And this is what's coming for Australia. We've got legislation passed through our parliament already for surveillance legislation and setting up artificial intelligence. And we've got to stop that happening, because all of these things undermine our freedom of individuals, our ability to think, and the basic things that we stand for as human beings, and the quality of life. I just said to you, it doesn't matter how much money you can be happy. But you should be recognised for your achievement. You should be able to provide security for your family, and you should be able to love people freely without being told by the government how you should think and what you should do. So Andrew Roberts is standing up for all of those things here, and this is much, much more important than thinking of climate change and climate change only. It's much, much more important because it affects you right now. You're alive on the planet right now, and you've got a right to be all you can be in our country. What do you think, Andrew?
No, I agree. I completely agree.
Just on that freedom, the Sydney Anglican Diocese has recently, as you know, directed the principals of certain schools, Islamic theology, that also you have sure, that marriage is a marriage between a man and a woman. Now that would influence the freedom of people who are same-sex marriages. What's the party's attitude on that?
Well, I think, our basic attitude on those types of issues are that there's an individual conscience vote on things like that. That's what our official party policy is. Me personally, I just think that we've got to focus as a political party on the main political issues of the day. And I see all sexual issues, whether I'm for them or against them, and I've got views on all sides, as being an extraction from the main game. If I went off now and talked about same-sex marriage, what I think or I didn't think, it would take away the focus from this election from what we think is really, really important, and we just won't do that.
It's free.
Sorry? It's free.
Comments. Excellent presentation, thanks. Just on the superannuation, as Aussies and as a finance guy, trillions of dollars get invested, Aussie dollars get invested in the European stock exchanges, US, like Apple, Tesla, all the other guys, which doesn't come back to you. That's a great policy. Can you elaborate on one about the bringing some of that dollars back offshore?
Well, it goes with some of other policies. With at the moment, Australia is the biggest exporter of a lot of mineral resources, and we export our ore at between $20 and $40. And the Japanese, for example, turn it into commodities they sell for $20,000, right? Yet their energy costs are more, their labour costs are more, and they suffer from the tyranny of distance. Do we think Australians are so hopeless that they can't compete on the world market? Do we think we can't take our natural advantages and stop selling away our opportunities to Asia and develop them here and be a powerhouse? And that's what we've got to do. Look at what we can do ourselves. And there's so much more that we can do ourselves. We've got to have a government. Its first priority is the people of this country. And as Craig Kelly tell you, that's not the priority of the Liberal Party. The priority of the Liberal Party is basically for each individual member to get his $200,000 a year as a member, to stay in there as long as he can, because he knows he wouldn't be employed anywhere else, to make sure they've got as much mentally devoid people in the parliament that they can control, and have a couple of people doing it. And you saw that with the leader of the Labor Party. They've just run out of stock. They've got their best guy there, and he doesn't know where he is, right? He doesn't know what policy he's got, but he knows he came from Balmain, and he knows that his mother had trouble bringing him up, and he recommends that's a fundamental thing of his life. And I sort of admire him for that, understand that sort of loyalty. But when you're standing on a national stage and you're trying to create an agenda for the country, you've got to put your arms around all Australians and imagine you're them and what you can do to make their lives better. And that's what we're missing. You got,
So last month, Bank of America in the United States released their official cost figures for a move to zero carbon. And the figure was $150 trillion. Their analysts said zero carbon is the same as zero COVID. Super expensive and also impossible. Do you have any comment about that?
well, it is. And the problem about it is being used as a political manoeuvre at the moment. When you deal with climate change in Australia, the Greens and a lot of other parties are funded by manufacturers of renewable energy, and they've got a vested interest in having governments buy their product, and that's a very, very sad thing. As I said to you before, the Glasgow and Paris Accords are not agreements to do anything. Each country just puts their memorandum up so they can sell the politics back home, and this policy is really all driven from someone in Switzerland that's deciding he can control the world with it, right? For example, the Pakistanis said, oh, well, we'll do something about climate change one day, but just not just now, right? China said that it was happy to reduce its emissions down to a target, and the target was a target that they'd already set and achieved. So, Australia's being sucked in by all of this, and a lot of our national wealth is going. We've got to remember, if you believe in climate change, 0.18% of the world carbon comes from Australia. So to imagine that what Zali Steggall here in Warringah is going to change the world is not very good, but it's good for tea parties. It's something the girls can talk about. It's something that people that have got a lot of money can say, well, we're doing something really positive, and they can develop their own little social set. But I'm really concerned about people that in Elizabeth in South Australia that haven't got a job, that haven't got any industry. And we need to establish industries for those people to work at. I'm concerned about people in the Pilbara that are concerned about processing minerals and having a job that's skilled rather than a basic job. I'm concerned about the poverty that exists in Western Queensland in this country that people don't look at, because all of those people deserve the opportunities. I'm concerned about a government and an opposition that wants to export our opportunities to other countries, that won't use our leverage to save ourselves. I'm concerned about irresponsible politicians that just borrow money and throw it at people, not worrying about how it's going to be repaid. And we realise we've got $1 trillion of debt. And I don't think many of you can realise what $1 trillion of debt is. It's a lot of money. I stood in Parliament against Tony Abbott because he wanted to impose austerity. That austerity was around about 30 to 40 billion. It wasn't $1 trillion. And talking about who can manage the economy best, and we know the Liberal Party can't. You had to run up $1 trillion worth of debt. It shows great no imagination at all. And the Prime Minister talks about full employment. He talks about full employment at wage rates that existed 10 years ago. And if you keep on bringing the amount of economic consideration down for labour, you'll always fill up labour markets if you want to go as cheap as you can go. But at what price? It's the price of our living standard. So we've got to aspire to be greater. We've got to look at our opportunities and say, well, we can utilise and process these resources here in Australia. We can get more revenue, export revenue. We can pay higher wages. We can have a better skilled workforce. We've got to realise in foreign policy that we don't need subs in 40 years' time. We need subs right now. One hostile sub placed between Singapore here, we run out of fuel in 60 days. And the United States at the moment has got 14 Los Angeles attack submarines with a good 15 years left of them that could be based in Hawaii, could be funded by us and be available straight away. But the US doesn't say that, because they can't upset the bureaucrats in Canberra who tell them you can't say that. You can't tell us that that's available. And those subs are available at about $2 billion each, not the 40 or 50 billion that's going to be put into these subs in 40 years' time. And you know what they become? They become things that lobbyists make money out of. How much of that 40 or 50 billion will go to lobbyists and middlemen that have done the deal? It's a great industry. You start out with a French nuclear sub, you run up some bills, you can't run up any more. Oh, we'll change it, we'll run up some more bills. So that's all it boils down to. Every day when I was in Parliament in Canberra, I had lobbyists at my door, at least 3 to 4 interviews a day. I just told them that I wasn't interested. I was interested in what my electorate said and what my people told me and what they needed. But we've got a corrupt system. It's not just attacking people for being corrupt. The system is corrupt and it's got to change. And we first stood in 2013, we got the balance of power in Australia, and we made some important decisions. But did I get attacked? Did I get attacked? Because they saw me as a great threat to our country. But I was no threat to the country. Truth was the threat to the country, to let the people know what was truly happening. Right? And so, so the trumpet sounds again in 2022 for me anyway. So I've answered the call, and so has 82,000 Australians who've joined our party. And so has Andrew Robinson, who's put his life on hold to offer himself for public service, to work for you, to make your lives better and protect and defend our nation. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Any more questions?
Just on the corrupt system, so you would support an integrity commission?
Well, the federal ICAC was an initiative of the Palmer United Party in 2013 by D.O. Wang and opposed by the Liberal and Labor Party. And once the people said that they wanted it, they both grabbed it. And now it's a Liberal Labor initiative. So it's our initiative.
Sally Steckles campaigned quite hard on the integrity commission recently.
Well, she's planning on one of our policies that we started in 2013. And if you go to Hansard and look at Senator Zhang from Western Australia, you'll see that he introduced that policy. So it's good to see that Sally can take the leadership from our party. She should read a few more of our policies. We'd be happy if she adopted them, right? That's true. All right, thanks. That's right. Thanks for everybody.
Authorised by Clive Palmer for the United Australia Party, Brisbane.